So this is another one in a series of Doug attempts to explain the strategic planning process in detail based on what I'm doing. And considering we have a small group here, this is certainly ask questions, do it. Let's make sure that you get the information that you have. I'm actually picking it up on the product and service comparison section of the workbook, which in an older version that I've got looks like page 23. And that would have been, in the external assessment section. So you're down, you're in the 6.1 section where it's got the subsections part of it. Now, is everybody with me?
Getting there.
Okay. What I'll probably do is pick it up in market analysis of competition, because I don't believe we reviewed that one the last time. Jerry, am I coming through any clearer? Now you're on mute. Now you really are on mute. All those funny comments that you made before about watching people while they're trying to take themselves off mute. There you go. Jerry, am I coming through any clear for you? Do you need me to
poke? Now that I turned my microphone up on my computer, it wasn't you, it was me.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to say I could be the member of the International Yelling Society and start broadcasting like that.
Little barbershop to me.
There you go. So, market analysis of competition. When I normally talk people through that, I ask them for not only kind of their normal competition, but who else could be considered a competitor based on what they're trying to accomplish. And again, I talked about this on a previous segment, the whole idea of the 1/4-inch drill bit versus the 1/4-inch nail. That if we were in the 1/4-inch drill bit business, we could be seeing all our competition as other manufacturers of drill bits. But the end result is, if there's somebody that's trying to put a 1/4-inch hole in their wall, they might be able to use a 1/4-inch nail, and they didn't need to use our drill bit at all. That's actually been a fascinating conversation that I've had with clients, and I've actually suggested that they get a list of competitors from other business advisors and people they trust. For example, when I was working with a home builder on the outskirts of Reading, I actually suggested that when it came time to identify competition, in addition to who he would normally think about, I said, you obviously do business with like loan brokers and mortgage brokers and so on. Said, just ask them the question, so who do you think, who do you see as my competition? And then he did the same thing with bankers. And he was blown away that other people had names that he wouldn't even remotely have considered as competitors of theirs. That was a real eye opener to him. Um, so when you start to think about that, I kind of take that and do that as a little twist, if you will, within that kind of market segment, and what's our product or what's the service that we're trying to use for that market segment, and then the competition, kind of the what is their product or their service. Some people have kind of only talked about the products or services that they see in direct competition of theirs. Other people have used this as a way of saying, you know what, we're probably better off if we take a more wide-ranging view of our competitors' offerings. Because quite candidly, I might be head-to-head with Charles on one item, but if he sells four things against my one, potentially this other firm could go, you know what? Let me go work with Charles, because I can write one invoice or write one check and I can buy all four products, as opposed to I've got to have a supplier for Charles and a supplier for this and a supplier for this and a supplier for this, and it kind of opens up a well. We may want to look at, to what degree do we broaden our offerings so we can be more of a one-stop shop.
Mm-hmm.
That oftentimes leads to a pretty robust conversation about what's our distinct advantage. And I tend to take a pretty hard line with them, in the sense of, whatever you tell me, how would you prove it? And again, a question that I stumbled onto many years ago, but I still find it effective, is if I hauled you into court and accused you of being a blank, if I accused you of being great in customer service, or if I accused you to be a great software company, would there be enough evidence to convict you? And if the answer to that is kind of, sort of, maybe, that's not very compelling. As somebody said, almost everything today has become way too commoditized. And so really trying to create that, what is that distinct advantage that we're talking about, is a lot harder than it sounds.
Mm.
So once you've kind of fleshed out who do you want to consider, or who should you consider your competition to be, now we get into what are the relative strengths, our strengths, to the competition, and what distinguishes them from us and what distinguishes us from them. And again, that's been that can have some really interesting ramifications and discussion, and by taking people places that they usually don't go.
I find prior to that, that's a good thing to do. But I like to walk people through like a Kano model type exercise, like especially with commoditized products. What's the basic functionality? What features make you competitive? A little bit distinctive, and then what features are really exciting. And that's a good, it puts it all on the table too. It's also sort of a carryover from their competitive survey. But at least in high tech, where you're talking about making investment,
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing to understand.
Yeah, I think that's probably worth capturing and building out. Thank you.
Very welcome.
I have a different question came to my mind, because you said if Charles has four, products against my one product, does that give him a selling advantage? I have the opposite question. Can you have too broad an array of products and services? And so people out in the market get confused about what is it exactly that you do. You know what I
I'm gonna,
mean?
yeah, I'm gonna talk out of both sides of my mouth. On the one hand, Amazon, right,
Everything.
Or Walmart that basically almost sells everything, right? But Mike Slepin used to talk about branding or positioning is what you do to the mind of the buyer. And he
Hmm.
always had my attention when he used to tell this story. In East Brunswick, New Jersey, there's Route 18. And Mike basically drove up and down Route 18 every day of the year. And there was a Firestone dealership that sold tires and had a gas pump. And there was like the equivalent of a Sunoco station that sold gas and always had a stack of tires, a covered stack of tires out in the front of the gas station. Basically, if I was channeling Mike, he would say, in 25 years, I never bought a single gallon of gas from a Firestone tire store. And in 25 years, I never bought a tire from the Sunoco gas station. So even though they had these offerings, if I say, hey, I need a tire, where would you recommend? He wouldn't expect people to go Sunoco. So I think a lot of it has to do with how that product or service, where are they trying to position that in the mind of the buyer?
That's
It also depends on the mind of the buyer because there's different motivations. I mean, all buyers want to limit the number of suppliers. On the other hand, I've seen the scenario where a buyer has no intention of buying the other offerings. They just view that as a way to make the seller more sustainable. I mean, for the buyer, it's kind of a risk to buy it into a one-trick pony type scenario that can this person go south on me and not recover.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
yeah.
I think my prediction is for the next couple of years, knowing that the supply chain has been basically turned on its head,
Mm.
I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on bogey inventory levels and alternative suppliers that are coming from different parts of the world, so that if shipping lanes get blocked in one part of the world, I've got some alternatives. I think that's going to be something where that pendulum is going to start to swing back a little bit to multiple suppliers within reason. It's just something I'm going to be watching for.
I guess I'm used to the manufacturing world, and they always want a second supplier. I mean, always. And like if you get into defense, I mean, you want multiple suppliers, but a lot of times the way the government writes specs, you can only find one person willing to do it. But
Well, I guess, I think, yes, well, Charles, I certainly understand. It just feels to me that people have put an awful lot of eggs in the just-in-time basket. And I think to some degree now is when they're paying the price. But I wouldn't be surprised if, hey, yes, I've got multiple. This is going to sound like more of a political statement than I intend. Yes, I've got multiple suppliers, but they're all in mainland China. So if the Chinese government says, "Hey, we're going to cut power, or we're going to take days off because of air pollution," in essence, you've got one supplier, right? As
Or
opposed
it's
to
a political issue and they're just not going to let them ship to us. It
yeah,
could be something that could strangle the economy here, strangle our supply chains here. Absolutely.
yeah,
although my experience is a seller usually assumes the risk of that inventory. I mean, the buyer doesn't, they want the inventory, but the seller's going to hold it.
Right. And pay for
Yeah.
it. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I'm just curious to see how that all kind of affects people's mindsets as they're kind of going through this. See how it all kind of plays out. So the those three questions: relative strengths to our competition, what distinguishes us from them, and what what distinguishes them from us. That really has again that's led to some very very vibrant conversations. Now we get into the product and service comparison. And I want to talk about this because I want you to read this literally, that this is how are we talking about product and service. The next section is going to talk about how we compare as an organization. So this is literally the offering. This has kind of gotten built out over the years so that the table that you see on page 23 under the product service comparison really can reflect it. What are those services? Depending on the size, I will ask them to kind of talk about current sales volumes if it's big enough. If their market share is a spec, I probably don't spend a lot of time kind of drilling down that well because I don't see much real payout coming out of it. But that whole idea of time specificity in terms of customer needs, if I need to have something and where speed is an advantage, or seasonality kinds of things, that could be big. And then the overall, how does this product or how does this service stack up against the competition? Now, I've had some people that have taken this chart and they'll do it by competitor. I've had other folks that have taken this chart and they'll do it by the competition, or they'll talk about what service we're doing, and then the equivalent of rows A through whatever across the top will be supply, competition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And then in that cell, they're really kind of doing a are we on par, or are we better than or worse than, similar to what you see at the end of that table right now, or kind of a plus minus or neutral kind of a thing. And then also getting a chance to kind of take a look, as you see on the at the end of that, hey, to what degree are the customer needs growing on this? Am I getting ready to, yes, it's something that we've got we're in good spot against our competition, and the marketplace is growing. That's wonderful. If we're weaker than our competition, and the whole marketplace is shrinking, man, that is you better be really good, or get out, right? I mean, you're taking a smaller piece of a shrinking market. That doesn't look that doesn't sound very good to me as an ongoing strategy. At the bottom of that page, what's the size of our defined market? I have a tendency to interpret that question from kind of a dollars and revenues perspective. Kind of how big is what it is that we're really going after. Over on the next page, 24, market share is traditional market share, kind of what percentage of the market we have, competition market share. There's one question that oftentimes I will write in, and that question is, what is our share of wallet? Both of you guys, or all three of you, all four of you, know what I'm talking about with share of wallet?
I think so. I mean, for a purchasing budget, how much of that entire budget do you get?
That's where I'm coming from. So
Right.
for so for example, the analogy that I use most frequently, just to make it easy for people, is let's talk about food. That if you spent $200 a week for food in all sources, what you buy at a grocery store, what you buy at the equivalent of a stop-in convenience store, what you buy from the equivalent of a food truck, if you happen to be where there's a food truck service and a manufacturing plant, what would you buy if how much would you spend in a high-end restaurant and so on? How much would you want to spend in something like a quick meal like a McDonald's or Burger King or something along those lines? If I added up all of those dollars, what's that total? And then what percentage of that $200 did you spend in McDonald's or grocery stores or whatever? So the whole idea behind share of wallet is people are already spending X. We're not trying to get their spending level from X to Y. We're saying they're already spending X. How can we get more of the $200 that they're already spending? That's when I look at trends, particularly within the grocery business. That is a great example where now there are stores in stores, right? When I was a kid, a grocery store was a grocery store. But now a grocery store is also a drugstore, and it's a processing place, and it's got flowers, and it's got freshly baked goods that in some cases are made right in the store. And there's certain grocery chains, particularly here in the East, that have an incredible array of hot prepared foods. That you can literally you can eat a full meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner in this grocery store and never have to leave. So they're basically capturing those dollars and saying, hey, we get a chance to make markup. Rather than giving that profit to a florist, we're going to keep the profit for us, and kind of builds the business that way. Yeah. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, so out here there's a Fry's. There's a lot of Fry's supermarkets out here. Fry's is a part of Kroger. Not only do they have all of the things you said, but in our mega store out here, they have built a wine bar, and the senior citizens in this area, which there are many, not only do they grocery shop, but they meet each other for a glass of wine and a little something to eat, and it's set right into the store. It's amazing. They spend the whole dang afternoon there.
Yep. Yep.
It's amazing, and then as a result, they buy more stuff. So it really works.
It's a great example. And,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, for years, I've used the example, somebody's buying from somebody, why isn't it you? And sometimes just asking that simple question has led people to kind of take their business or looking at different opportunities than they've looked at it before. So I think that share of wallet question, I personally think, is even more important than a market share question.
Yeah, my experience in strategic planning is the most important question in the whole plan is the market size. If you screw that up, the rest of the plan is very suspect. Yet I find you have to get into a pretty large company before people actually do that exercise. I had to be inventive in my own career for how you do that. But
okay.
You have to make a guess. So, I guess my question is, how do you get customers to do that, or do you end up doing that?
What I try to find out is if it is so big that their piece of it is so microscopic that even if they quadrupled their business, it still wouldn't move the needle. Then I tend to ask myself, is this an academic exercise, or are we going to do something with this information once we know it? I mean, if somebody said, hey, we figured out we've got a 1.5% market share. I mean, if they went to 2.5%, which would still be significant, what difference is it going to make? I mean, obviously, it's going to make difference in top line sales, and it's going to make, with any luck, it's going to make difference in profitability. But to me, it's not like nobody's going to. It's not winning the battle. When I say corn chips, you don't think of Doug's corn chips. You're going to think of, Fritos or Tostitos or Scoops or something. You're not going to think of Doug's corn chips.
That gets back.
That's my bias on it.
That gets back to your comment earlier, though, when you did talk about market size. If it's up to you as to how you define your target, your slice, and even big markets. I mean, there's regional markets, there's local markets. I mean, you can do it either way, but at least in some market classification,
yep.
If you don't have a 20% share, what are you doing?
You're almost irrelevant. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can be stomped. I mean, you're dancing with the elephant. I mean, you can get stepped on in a hurry.
Yeah. Charles, when you brought that up, I wrote down here on my sheet: is it worth the chase? If the market's either so glutted with competition, or the market's shrinking, for example, then why bother? Focus your attention elsewhere where you might have a better chance of winning, right?
Right.
So said the blacksmith shop owner, right? But
No, I mean that's especially with young people starting businesses. It's a question they never ask themselves. How big is this market, and how small of a share am I going to have?
One of the books that I actually found pretty fascinating was Blue Ocean Strategy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I think that kind of speaks to what you're talking about, Charles, is, kind of, why should I swim around in a red blood ocean? If I can basically relax and enjoy myself. Kind of that old, I forget which baseball player said it, but hit them where they ain't, right?
David Packard, his wisdom was, if you can't dominate a market, why are you doing it?
Boy, that sounds a lot like a Jack Welch philosophy as well. Number one or number two, or get out.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, he used it sort of for innovation. I mean, that engineers really had to come up with something, gee whiz, that could dominate a market. And if you strike out, you're done.
But what about the smaller companies? Because I see that in a larger organization, how you want to become the dominant player in the market or whatever, I get that. But what about smaller market, or a smaller company where do they see that as an important? I'm not saying they shouldn't now. I'm just saying, asking the question, do they see that as important? If they say, well, I'm never going to dominate the market ever, and nor do I want to. I just want my piece.
I think you do, though. You want to have exciting technology. It gets back to the Kano model, and why I like that is that you have to have something exciting, because for most small businesses, especially in technology, their goal is not to dominate the market. Their goal is to get bought by someone who is dominating the market.
Right.
That's. I mean, they're all looking to get flipped. I mean, they're not thinking they're going to stay in this business for 20 years. They can want to get bought in 3.
Yeah, true.
Jerry, when you were talking about micro businesses that are really competing against a big company, for as wacky as it sounds, the company that originally came into my mind was Tesla.
Yeah.
Right? They're making a couple of thousand cars a year against GM's millions, right? And who owns the market cap all of a sudden? I mean, the fact that this, what is it, Rivian or whatever it is, I'm probably bastardizing the name, has a greater, without even frickin' making a car, has a greater market cap than Ford? This to me is crazy.
Yeah, but Tesla has several businesses. They also make rockets that are reusable.
Yeah.
That's a big business.
Yeah, they make.
But imagine if you and I were
charging systems too.
Say that again, Jerry.
They make energy charging systems too.
Yeah.
for solar and so on.
So in some cases, some of the kinds of the things that I've thought about over the course of time, I've even had to go back and ask myself the question: am I using old paradigms? In terms of kind of how I view things. And so I try to kind of walk the line of, let me kind of stay in the middle and ask questions and let the groups that are running the companies grapple and kind of wrestle with their own answer, and whatever it is that they do, I keep in mind it's their company to do with what they want. To me, we're running a process just to make sure that they're not kind of walking by things that somebody ought to at least be asking the question to make sure that they're all on the same page.
Yeah, they're great. They're great questions. And especially now, because of the impact of COVID and even post-COVID, the impact is so dramatic on how we think through, how many restaurants, or not just restaurants, but food service companies run out of product. They can't get the product. Now, what do they do? How do they stay in business while they're trying to get the stuff, off the container ships or whatever?
Exactly.
What do they do? Right. So these are real problems that they have not experienced in the past like they are now. So, and it's our job, I think, to help them think through that. Like my company right now is helping companies think through. So where do you find employees? How do you hang on to the employees that you have?
Yeah.
What do you do? I think that's our job, to do that. So how do, are we giving them real life solutions, or are we just saying, yeah, it's a problem? You're right. We can't find people either.
That's a hard problem because the owner has to swallow their ego to look at that problem, and there aren't a lot of those people.
No, well, no, that's right. Yeah, he can swallow all he wants, but in the end, if he doesn't have the people to do the work that he's promised he's going to do, he's going to lose. He's going to lose clients. They're going to look elsewhere, right? So same problem.
No question about it. No question about it. Just kind of moving down a couple of questions. What are our geographic boundaries or limitations? While you could say the internet and e-commerce have had a dramatic effect, you can do business literally all over the world on a click anymore. It's fascinating to me that when I was working with a small construction company here in New Jersey, and I was asking them the question, that came out of this thing about sales, and just in terms of asking them to do some research, I asked them to pull the last 20 or 25 proposals they responded to, and then next to them put, did they get it or did they not get it? And what was absolutely fascinating, when I came back a week later and they had that information in front of them, they found out that of the 20 that they had submitted, the only ones that they won, and you can tell how old this data is for jobs that were between $150,000 and $350,000, period. They didn't win anything below that, and they didn't win anything above it. And because below that, to put it in the vernacular, they were competing against two guys, a pickup truck and a butt crack. And
it's a reverse auction.
Above that, they were competing against companies that owned all kinds of heavy equipment and so on. And what they found was what priced them out of the market when they were in that north of 350. They were typically more complex jobs, right? They weren't always as close to their home base. And so the cost of kind of ramping up and doing that work when it was X amount of money or X amount of miles away, there was a cost associated with that. And so that would actually add to the cost of what they were bidding on. And ultimately they got smart enough that said, we're not going to waste our time writing RFP or responding to RFPs where basically we have a zero chance of winning that work. You know, now, if one of their all-time great clients said, "Hey, I need you to bid on this," yeah, but then they would do it obviously to keep the relationship. But there was no expectation that they were going to win that work. I mean, the dollars were really critical. So when you start to think about that, somebody once said the reason why you want to be really clear about what market you're going after is you don't have enough money, period, end of discussion, to get your marketing budget going after all kinds of stuff outside of your sweet spot. You're going to run out of money. And then what's worse, the money you are throwing at it, you're not going to get a return on it, and that's going to make it worse. So now you're throwing good money after bad because you're not really concentrating on the area that you've got a shot. And I, as a result of that, I know we're talking about strategic planning here, not sales. But as a result of that discussion, I make sure that I cover that area with any group that I'm talking about sales and marketing with.
No, but that gets into, you talk about service. I mean, what you're offering really is, and a lot of manufacturers, it's what they build. But if the product requires installation, regular maintenance, I mean, there's all kinds of other things that go with that. That's cost, and they expect that to be local. It's nice that you live 3,000 miles away, but they want their service to be down the road.
Yeah, if I'm buying a high end, infrared spectrometer, I'm not exactly to fly somebody. I'm not expecting somebody to fly in from Switzerland every time it needs a tweak.
Right.
So it may not be worth going after that market if you can't really support it. So that to me is the boundaries or the limitations. The other thing is I've had some fascinating conversations with people from a mental boundaries perspective that in the city of Philadelphia has been mentioned to me more than once, that if you haven't been in Philadelphia since basically 1795, you're still probably considered the new kid. And as a result of that, while there may not be any laws preventing people to do business together, almost from a carpetbagger perspective, if you don't have a presence in Center City, Philadelphia, and at that point the Delaware River is only about a mile wide, you can have a presence right across the river in New Jersey. Just try to do business in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm not talking about with the city government. I'm talking about the mindset within Philadelphia businesses is we're expecting to do businesses with people from the city of Philadelphia. I'm sure there's some exceptions to that. But when so many people talk to you about, my God, it's hard to break into any business within Philadelphia.
Yeah.
When you hear that from enough people, there's got to be more than just a shred of truth to it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Back in Illinois when we were there, we had 35 municipalities we worked with in Illinois. And when one found out that we were working with another municipality, they wanted to work with us. It was like that. Out here in Arizona, it's completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. It's so hard to break in. Really, we have two. That's
wow.
It. It's a very different environment, and you're right. So the geographical stuff is really important. Most of our clients are not in Arizona. They're not.
Fascinating.
The smallest number are here. They're somewhere else. California, we do better in California, for example.
Wow.
They're not here. It's I can't figure it out. That's one of the reasons I'm on this call is try to understand from a marketing, it's almost amusing that at the top of the hour I have a marketing meeting with my team. But it really is hard to figure out. So we have a new product and we're going out to market, and where do we market this thing? How do we figure that out? And so some of this has been really, really helpful, especially this idea of geographic boundaries, because this product does better being delivered in person than it does online. And so just like strategic planning would be that way too, Doug, right?
Yeah, but I gotta admit, I've gotten really comfortable delivering strategic planning the way we are right now.
Yeah, and we do our own retreat that way. We do it virtually, and we make it work really well. But it isn't. But this process, this prioritized leader thing that we're doing, is not like that. And so you're right. You got to understand your product. You got to understand, how much of their wallet are they willing to spend on something like this is another question,
Yeah.
right? And then what are the boundaries? Are these places where my team's gotten to a point they don't want to run all over the country delivering services? They really don't. They would rather do it online. They've gotten very comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So
One of the things when I was in my career is we had a model where you had two axes. One axis was product differentiated, and the other one was service differentiated. And if both of those were low, you had a commodity. But if you were on one of the axes, like you were strictly product differentiated or strictly service differentiated, your strategy should be to move to the middle. That if you have products, you need to figure out what are the services that go with it. And if you have services, what are the products you can sell with that service to increase your revenue? Which is kind of pertains to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So that kind of takes us into the next piece, which is kind of the decision maker analysis, starting on page 25. Who are the buyers and influencers and/or decision makers? Now, in those days when the words influencers was first used, TikTok and Facebook and Twitter hadn't been invented yet. So let's use it's probably helpful to at least think about the context that the sentence was originally written in. And an influencer was, wow, am I going to date myself here? If Macy's bought it, you could probably sell it to Gimbel's. Because if it was good enough for Macy's, Gimbel's department store would go, yep, we'll take it. So in that particular case, it wasn't just the person who said yes. It's who would be those thought leaders that when they signed up for it could basically, start to pave the road down for a little bit additional business. Not unlike what Jerry just talked about in Illinois with the experiment. You get one municipality, and pretty soon it's like, hello, would you do business with me too? It's like, man, that is an ideal situation, right? When that starts to happen. So there's a great example that if you go, wow, if we know that if we can get this person to really fall in love with what we do, man, can they open an awful lot of doors. So those are the kinds of things that the influencers can be. They can be authors. The influencers can be other buyers. But the influencers can also be professional, executives of a trade association or something along those lines. That can all lead to that. And then the other piece that you see on 25 there are there some things that through the mind of the decision maker, what's really important to them? Are they worried about being able to have things in terms of seasonality concerns? Or now we can probably add supply chain or supply chain reliability, might be one of those questions that may surface, today based on reality, versus the lead time versus oh yeah, Charles wants to introduce a new product to me. Yeah, but you know what? It's got to go through my quality check. And then it's got to be shortlisted. And then we got to do a 30-day trial of the product. And then we got to have a second pilot where we're going to run 10,000 of them. And then we're going to do customer interviews, how they like the new product versus the old product. And all of a sudden, my approval time in reality becomes a 6-month, slugfest, to try to get across the way. There might be, decision makers that go, I am not willing. I mean, I love you like a brother, but I am not willing to go through down that battle, so that you can get on a short list of our suppliers. Charles, you look like you were going to comment on that before.
Yeah, I mean, just the way this whole influencer question. I mean, it seems like there's a couple ways you can take it. I mean, sometimes Yelp is an influencer if you have a retail business. But it seems like I don't know if it's so much a business strategy. It really gets into your selling strategy and like how are you going to market? I mean, who are you trying to get information to? Who are you trying to get referrals from?
Yep.
Who do you need to partner with? I mean, it's all that kind of a question.
That's right. And when you start to get into those, then you also have the additional pieces. Are you hitching your wagon to the right star?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The other reaction I had, though, too, is as you were talking, there's the buyer's style. I mean, are they a follower? What you're describing with municipalities, they're all followers. But there are some people who are very evangelical that they'll have an idea, they'll want to run with it, and 8 hours later, they've forgotten about it.
What goes up like a bottle rocket comes down like a bottle rocket.
Or they're all excited, and then they talk to the technical guy, and the technical guy explains why this is really a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's those early adopter guys. You got to watch out for them.
The over on page 26, the channel of distribution analysis. I think that's pretty straightforward, to be blunt. And down in customer value analysis, this is almost kind of another level of what I was just talking with Charles about, and that's of the various market segments. Number one, how much are people even aware that you exist, which is kind of the first column on that sheet, or the second column. And then the third column is, to what degree am I playing you bet your company if I guess wrong and start to do business with you? And a lot of times people don't take a very good thought about, hey, I'm only X number of dollars to do business with us. What people in our business don't always think about, just kind of taking it out of strategic planning in general and putting it into our business in specific, is if you screw up my management team, you've cost me a lot more than what I've paid you. If you screw with my people culture and you guess wrong, man, that's an expensive lesson.
Yeah.
Right? Think of the number of people, and I guess my poster child on this one is the software industry. Think of the number of companies that have been literally sold a bill of goods from software companies that a couple of $100,000 later, if not millions, and umpteen months, they don't have anything that's working yet. And the answer is, well, we'll build you another custom program to be able to do this. And my question is, where in the world should that ever be rewarded behavior? So I'm not so sure that people always take a look at, kind of this risk profile in terms of, hey, if we guess wrong on this, what's it really going to cost?
Yeah.
But
There's a classic Dilbert where they had the salesman. Dilbert always portrays salesman as sort of a goof. But the salesman's calling. He goes, "Hey, we need more bugs. This is great business."
If only there was more of that.
Government. government. I mean, the way you make money is to have bugs.
That's right.
And in our business too, and not only that, Doug, not only that issue of does the consultant come in and screw everything up, which certainly has happened out there for sure. And we all share in that reputation, unfortunately.
We do.
But not only that, the client themselves does not take the advice that they're given
Mm-hmm.
and then blames the consultant
Yep.
anyway. So there's a lot of liability connected to a service business like ours in that regard. There always is. And so some clients are just never, ever, ever going to buy in. They just have made up their mind that what they're doing is working, even though there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. It doesn't matter.
I love that line from Will Rogers. Some clients' minds are like concrete, all mixed up and permanently set.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that basically gets us down. The last column there on 26 is kind of, so where are we from a track record and reputation perspective? Are we kind of seen as better, worse, neutral, kind of thing? We're approaching the top of the hour. I'm going to see if I can get through the next two segments here in the 6 minutes that I have left. 6.2, this is the product or services competitive analysis. And this page right here is pretty straightforward. I've been blown away with how people have taken the stuff that's in column 1 and they've defined it based on what it means to them. Even, like, for example, when I tend to think about utility, the way this was originally phrased was basically ease of use, or flexibility in terms of kind of use versus versatility that would kind of allow you to do multiple things, kind of a Swiss Army knife, kind of a thing. But that being said, people use this as an opportunity to define it their way, which I think is wonderful. So I've kind of learned from that and basically say what phraseology should we substitute in here that would be the most relevant to what it is that you're doing. Like serviceability, for example. If I've got a machine, and a car is a great frickin' example. If you got to take 90% of the car apart to change a battery, yeah, you can still change a battery, but it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be hard as hell to do, and it's going to be expensive, and a lot of times, people are designing things based on functionality. They're not always thinking of designing things based on what's the lifetime cost of keeping this sucker actually running. So that's
in the past. In the past, Doug, it'd be called a Chrysler Sebring.
Where you got to take the seats out in order to change the battery.
It's under the wheel well somewhere.
Yeah,
some crazy stuff.
Yeah. I feel your pain, Jerry. So that's kind of
it wasn't me.
So that's kind of what you see there on page 27, where of these areas kind of where are we? And again, I ask people that this is not about, don't touch up the x-rays. Wherever you are, you are. If you're really not as good as competition, don't kid yourself, because all you're going to be doing is building stuff on a weaker foundation. But I do like the idea of, hey, what kind of improvement or action steps do you think we really ought to use this? What does this surface that we ought to take advantage of? And obviously the prioritization can be very helpful as well.
But you talk about cars, and Apple's going through the same thing where they're getting sued because you can't change a battery. I think the cars make it difficult to service intentionally because that's the only way dealers make money.
70% of revenue.
Yeah.
Could be.
So anyways, there's strategy behind it. Some people have motives.
That's true. Right. I do want to speak a little bit about page 28, 6.3 organizational competitive analysis. And then on our next episode of Doug Explains Strategic Planning, we can pick it up at 7.0. But on 6.3 organizational competitive analysis, this is almost neutral in the sense of how do you as an organization stack up against other organizations in your industry, having nothing to do with product or service. To a large degree, this is going to also start to populate some of your thought process around your SWOT analysis. Or better yet, I love the fact that it's a slot and not a SWOT, because to me, a limitation is different than a weakness. I think we talked about this on the last time or one of the last calls or a power summit or something like that. If Jerry's got an organization of 5 people and Charles has got an organization of 150 and there's a project to be done, even if Jerry worked people 24/7, 7 days a week, he doesn't have the bandwidth that Charles might have. So it's not a weakness. They both could be equally as good, but it's a limitation. Well, I kind of see that same thing against when you take a look at the column in 28. It's, hey, if somebody's got 9,000 stores and Jacqueline has 1, it kind of is what it is. Jacqueline's store might be the best store on the planet, but from a capacity perspective, it's not going to be the same as having 9,000 outlets in terms of capacity. So I ask people that, again, don't take it personally. It's just, where are you? Is this an asset versus your competitors? Is it kind of neutral? Is it not really applicable? And then again, using that to say, all right, what kind of things coming out of here should we need to take into consideration? So I've got 4 o'clock at the top of the hour.
Yep.
And so I'm going to say thank you, number one. And for those listening at home, I'm going to wish everybody happy holidays. And I can say that generically because this way, if I say happy holidays, regardless of when people listen to it for the next 17 years, there's probably a holiday coming up for somebody, and that'll be okay. But thank you all for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy
Bye, Jay.
Thanksgiving.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.